War has never been pretty. The violence and loss of life that comes with war has devastated civilization since the dawn of humanity. However, there are some forms of warfare that are less physically violent yet can still be effective. Psychological warfare is an example of such operations that have been used for a very long time. In U.S. psychological operations, the United States government seeks to manipulate the emotions, motives, and rational thinking of audiences to induce or reinforce behavior or beliefs that are favorable to U.S. objectives. One operation in particular stands out: Operation Wandering Soul. The Vietnam War and the United States' involvement began in 1954 and continued until the fall of Saigon on April 30, 1975. North Vietnam and its principal ally, the United States, engaged in a long and expensive war against South Vietnam and its communist government. The United States stepped into the conflict due to the tensions brewing with their main adversary in the Cold War, the Soviet Union. Propaganda is a staple of communist influence, so the United States and Vietnam sought to counter it with their own propaganda. As a decorated commander, General William Westmoreland is quoted as saying, "Psychological warfare and civic action are the very essence of the counterinsurgency campaign here in Vietnam. You cannot win this war by military means alone." In the mid-1960s, the 4th Psychological Operations Group arrived in Vietnam and was divided into 4 battalions: 6th PSYOP Battalion, 7th PSYOP Battalion, 8th PSYOP Battalion, and 10th PSYOP Battalion. Each of those 4 battalions were stationed in different areas for support in Vietnam. Soon, a plan was hatched to demoralize Viet Cong troops enough to desert their positions by instilling fear and psychological torment, and out came Operation Wandering Soul. The United States military knew that in Vietnamese culture, there were profound superstitious beliefs surrounding death, and that it was believed that those who have passed away needed to have a proper burial or else be doomed to wander the earth for all eternity. The fate would be even worse for those who had faced a violent death far away from home. Weeks were spent engineering ghostly tapes that were recorded in a studio in Saigon with the help of South Vietnamese troops and defected Viet Cong soldiers. These unsettling tapes included cries of women and children, howling and wailing, and banging gongs. There were also voices made out to sound like the descendants of the Viet Cong, begging them to go home. The disembodied voices cried, "My friends, I have come back to let you know that I am dead. I am dead. It's hell. I am in hell. Don't end up like me. Go home, friends, before it is too late." The tapes also had voices of ghosts, of Vietnamese folklore, such as the tightening knot ghost, an entity that was said to whisper "coco," meaning neck in Vietnamese, into the ears of enemy troops and convince them to end their own lives. This top-secret operation was organized by the 6th PSYOP Battalion with support from the U.S. Navy, and loudspeakers were set up near areas where the Viet Cong enemies were known to have been hiding. Some U.S. soldiers strapped speakers to their backs and tactfully navigated around the perimeter of the Viet Cong occupied areas. Speakers were also hung from trees or played from U.S. military helicopters that simultaneously dropped surrender leaflets and Republic of Vietnam flags over enemy territory. This would often result in a firefight between the U.S. and Viet Cong soldiers, so the helicopter was escorted by a separate aircraft for return fire. Beginning around 8 p.m. after nightfall, the tapes would be played.
Còn tôi, vợ tôi kêu tôi đang ba đang về với con. Tôi đã về với mình đây. Nhưng tôi còn đâu mảnh hình hài nữa. Tôi đã chết rồi má con bây ở. Tôi hẳn không biết chừng nào. Các bạn của tôi phải về để nói cho các bạn biết rằng tôi đã chết. Địa ngục, cái chết thật là oan uổng, thật là vô nghĩa, thật là nhưng lúc tôi biết thì đã quá muộn rồi. Các bạn ơi, các bạn còn sống, còn có ngày các bạn gặp được người thân yêu của các bạn. Các bạn có nghĩ đến đó. Trở về các bạn, muốn mau đi, dứt khoát mau đi, lừa bỏ đi các bạn. Nếu không thì không thể tránh được cái sự cảm thương như tôi. Trở về đi các bạn ơi, nếu không thì quá muộn rồi, quá trễ rồi. Trở về đi, về đi.
Whether or not these tapes were a success for the U.S. to gain any ground on the war is questionable, but they without a doubt made an impact, and there is evidence that the Viet Cong began organizing recovery efforts for their fallen soldiers after hearing the haunting voices on the tapes. The tapes were certainly frightening and even terrified the civilian population within earshot of the loudspeakers. Other American military units experimented with different types of broadcasts and implemented the sound of a tiger's growl around a hilltop occupied by about 150 Viet Cong troops. They quickly fled, abandoning their positions. Psychological operations were in full force in Vietnam, and another tactic was to distribute propaganda leaflets around the areas occupied by the Viet Cong. The 19th PSYOP Company produced 100,000 copies of this leaflet depicting an ace of spades on a skull. The text on the leaflet reads, "Viet Cong, this is a sign of death." The use of the ace of spades during warfare has a long history dating back to World War I and was utilized in Vietnam as a kind of death calling card to further demoralize Viet Cong soldiers. U.S. soldiers would oftentimes place an ace of spades card in their helmet bands and one in the mouths of fallen Viet Cong troops to send a message to the Viet Cong that death was imminent. The card seemed to raise morale for the U.S. soldiers and gained such popularity that crates of cards were requested from the United States Trading Card Company, who then sent the crates marked "Bicycle Secret Weapon." Today, 4th Psychological Operations Group looks very different than what it did in the Vietnam era and is now sectioned into different areas of expertise that support different countries around the globe. There are now 5 battalions. 1st PSYOPS Battalion, that supports operations in the Caribbean and Central and South America. 5th PSYOPS Battalion for the Indo-Pacific region. 6th PSYOP Battalion, which supports European operations. 7th PSYOP Battalion, supporting Africa, and 8th PSYOP Battalion, that supports operations in the Middle East and Central Asia. Thanks for watching. I really enjoyed making this video since I was assigned to 6th Psychological Operations Battalion when I was in the Army. I always enjoyed learning about the history of my unit, and the Vietnam operations were very fascinating to me. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for future content. Until next time.